Caregivers, have you ever felt like nothing? I mean, nothing is going right? Well, cheer up and welcome to Dave the Caregiver's Caregiver radio program, where you'll learn how to avoid that dreaded thing called caregiver burnout and how to survive the grief process. You know, with roughly 100 million caregivers in the U.S. and Canada alone, that's about a third of the population. That means that everyone probably knows someone caring for a loved one. Join Dave and his guests now and every Wednesday at noon Pacific time as they discuss avoiding caregiver burnout and surviving grief. So find a comfortable place to relax, kick up your feet, and prepare to feel better and to receive practical tips and tools that you can start using immediately to get you through today and every day so you can survive your tomorrows. But not just survive, but to live life fully and abundantly. Yes, you heard me right. That is a possible goal to achieve. And now, here's your host, Dave Nasssaney. Usually I say from Los Angeles, but no, I got to say from Waikiki Beach in Hawaii, a big aloha. Welcome to all my listeners out there in Radio Land. I'm Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver, coming to you live globally through Blog Talk Radio Network, as well as 7 other audio and video platforms, including YouTube, iTunes, where all our recorded pods and videocasts are saved for your later on-demand listening pleasure, including, of course, our website, caregiverscaregiver.com. And our goal here is to do our very best to help you avoid that dreaded thing called caregiver burnout. It sounds nasty because it is nasty. Now, we have an exciting show planned for you today with normally my lovely co-host Adrienne Gruberg is here, but she was recovering from knee surgery. She lives in Manhattan, and her doctor said it was okay for her to go outside. So she went outside with her cane on the sidewalk, and somehow she just tripped and she fell and her leg opened up and blood was everywhere. They had to take her to the hospital and almost redo the entire surgery. So poor Adrienne is in the hospital again. And our prayers are with you, Adrienne. We know what you're going through. So anyway, it's just me today. And today we'll be interviewing Ada Mark, hospice volunteer and realtor, and her friend Wendy Oshiro.
Wow.
I guess. Was that right?
Yes. Are we?
Oh, yes. 10 points for Dave.
For Shaka then Ada.
Okay, Shaka. Hi. Aloha.
Former caregiver and realtor, current realtor, sharing regrets that she currently has about when she took care of her parents and what she would have done differently. So this is a great opportunity for all you caregivers who know you're messing up out there. You're going to have someone who's been there, done that, made all the mistakes, and is going to show you how you cannot make those mistakes. So you will not want to miss this show. As I said, I'm your host, Dave Nasssaney. This show is the caregivers of every single kind. And the one thing we know about caregivers is that they are caring and they're selfless and they're sacrificial souls. But they have this one tiny little problem. They're very prone to burnout because they tend to put everyone else's needs above their own. And maybe that's why 30% of caregivers actually die before their loved ones do, and the rest of them just get sicker and end up in a hospital needing a caregiver of their own. So we want to stop that. And we can learn something from the airlines who tell us that in the event of an emergency, an oxygen mask will fall. Put your mask on first before you attempt to help your loved one with their mask. Hello, what an amazing metaphor for all of life. Take care of you first, not out of selfishness, but out of survival. Now, we also talk about grief and loss here and the devastating effects it can have on us. Anytime we suffer a loss, we go through a grief process. You know, you have a boyfriend and your girl dumps you. You go through a loss. You grieve. And it could take days, weeks, months, years. Some people never get over it. Everyone is different. Unfortunately, folks, there's only one way to get out of the grief process. You got to go through it. There's no shortcuts. Can't go around it, over it, under it. Got to go through it. Sorry, I didn't make the rules. So hopefully we can help you through your grief and your loss if you happen to feel like you're stuck. And I want to take this time to thank my last week's guest, Percy Ihara, founder of Generation TV, Radio, and Publication Magazine. And he did a great job. And just a reminder, you can listen to that interview and all of our interviews right here on our website, caregiverscaregiver.com. And I am so excited that my new best-selling book is continuing to sell, and we're still on our book and media tour. I just did morning show number 19 today, this morning, and I'm going to do number 20 tomorrow, all across the country, sharing my message, how to prevent your loved one's illness and disease from actually killing you. So my life, it's my book, it's My Life Too, best-selling, um, from Amazon. Reclaim your caregiver sanity by learning when to say yes and when to say no. And we are just so excited that caregivers are buying the book and that it's helping and that we're actually keeping caregivers alive. Now, you don't need to be a caregiver to buy this book, because give it to a caregiver you know. Everybody knows a caregiver, and you might even be saving their life. So enough of that. Hey, big welcome to my guest, Ada. I'm sorry, depending on what part of the country you're in, it's Ada or Ada. You say tomato, I say tomato. Okay, enough of that. And Wendy, her friend. Now, guys, I usually like to ask my guests just who is Ara and Wendy, and why were you two put on this earth? Ara, you go first, and then Wendy.
Well, it's between you and me.
She's so modest. She just says, I don't know why I'm here. Of course you do.
I believe the Lord allowed everything and anything happened for a reason.
Amen.
And I do believe that there's a reason why, when you came to my open house on Sunday, and I happened to look up, who is this Dave? I normally don't look at my clients, I really don't. But when I clicked and I saw what's happening, I said, wow, I'd like to know more about it.
You mean on the internet? You did a search?
Yeah. And
Cool.
and that was really cool. That was really cool. And because of my volunteer, I've been doing it for 3 years in hospice. I have seen many people. They will be with the loved one on their bedside, no more than two weeks, and then before you know it, they are just decline coming. They just not coming.
Sure.
I have seen people have no loved one. They just virtually died on their own. Very sad. But still, there are people who are there day in and day out until the person leaves. So I have seen different faces and different
Sure.
situation, and I really appreciate what you're doing and
Thank
how
you.
you're sharing this joy that you found. It almost from the darkest valley, but yet because of God, you found this joy, and love to hear you, share your life. Yeah, I
Yes,
think
well,
we-
that's why I wrote my book. That's why I have my radio show. And so my life's an open book, so to speak. Just go to the website and there you have it. And that's very interesting that you don't normally check people out who sign your open house. I was riding my bike, getting some exercise here in Hawaii, and I've came that close to buying a condo about 8 years ago, just before the crash. And fortunately, I pulled out at the last minute because that was when real estate prices went down, and it was a good thing I did. But I have this dream that one day I'd love to live on the islands one day, and I'm always looking at open houses every time I'm here. And you were hosting a really nice one, actually. So,
There's still people.
so you don't know why you looked me up. It was just a God thing, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
And
I'm
it's actually,
glad you did, because you
I'm
know what
glad.
this woman did? She called me and she says, "Oh, I'm so pleased to meet you. So glad you came to my open house. I want to cook you dinner." Uh,
No,
Apparently, you're
you skip one part. The part is the Lord really placed you in my heart, stir my hearts that want to do something for you
uh,
because you have done so much. I think that's the
oh.
reason, not because I just feel like cooking and you came to my open house. A lot of people came to my
Yes,
open
lot
house
of
and they
people.
don't get my cooking. Trust
Well,
me.
I feel very, very special. I told her that my wife's a gourmet cook, and so when you're a gourmet cook, there's a high intimidation factor. We don't get invited out a lot because they just say, "Oh, I can't compete with that." But some few brave souls have had us over and just ordered pizza and stuff because they're just cool. They're not into impressing anything, and we love going out, and so I'm very impressed that you cooked us dinner. Um,
I was intimidated too. I was intimidated because you told me that
but
Charlie
you
was a
did
really
it.
good
But
cook.
you did it. You walked past the intimidation, and you know what? You are a gourmet cook in your own right, because that she made pork chops, and
Oh,
Lamb chops. I'm sorry. I always get pork chops and lamb chops
I
together.
will not cook for you again, Dave.
Lamb chops,
Got
because
it.
I'm Middle Eastern, and she says, "Do you like lamb?" And I says, "Yes, we eat a lot of lamb." And so it was tender. It was as tender as filet mignon, and it was seasoned perfectly. I mean, I was just sucking those bones, and it was just cooked perfectly, the perfect color. So I told her she should go on Bobby Flay and try to beat him because he'd probably win. So thank you
and I
so
got
much.
and I got these strange looking potatoes, right? Would you like look at
Yes,
those?
strange looking potatoes. First, I thought they were mushrooms, giant mushrooms. And then, no, 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 wait. She told me what these were, but I can't remember. And then the broccoli, my wife will only eat broccoli if it's well done and soft. And it was cooked perfectly. It was soft. She doesn't like chewy, not chewy, but crunchy broccoli. So you scored a lot of points. So
Well, thank you.
kudos to you, and I'm glad that you weren't intimidated. And I always tell people, well, I'm afraid to do this. You know what? Just do it afraid. Many, many years ago, one of my granddaughters, when she was staying with us, and she had to be like 8 years old, and we have a pool, and she says, "I want to show you a new dive," and so it was some kind of flip, and she goes, "Oh, I'm afraid." I says, "It's okay to be afraid. Just do it afraid." And she looked at me like she never heard that before. And she says, "Oh, okay," and she did it. And so that's been my philosophy. Just do it
Good.
afraid.
That's a good
All
one.
right. So thank you. That's a great introduction that you gave. And again, I'm flattered that you looked me up. Flattered that you wanted to help us just give back, so to speak, by cooking us dinner. Thank you so much. We thoroughly enjoyed it. I told my wife this is the best dinner we had since we've been here. Some of these restaurants are just okay food, and they charge you an arm and a leg. Okay, Wendy, it's your turn. Who is Wendy Oshiro? Am I pronouncing that right?
Correct.
Oshiro. So
Uh-huh.
tell us about you.
I've been a realtor for 26 years. I was a caregiver for about 7 years. 7 years
Wow.
of my life.
Mhm,
Wow.
mhm.
For your
Yeah.
parents?
And my parents, I was in my 40s, early 40s. I have one child back when he was still young. So basically, I was caring for my parents along with my son. I had two other siblings who are local. They also live in Oahu, and we were fighting all the time, constantly. Who,
Really?
hey, who's you? It's your turn to take care of the parents. Yeah, I wasn't, a believer of Christ back when. I look back and yes, I wish I was.
What would
And
you have
So
maybe,
done differently?
oh, I don't,
we'll get
is
into
that,
that.
yeah, I
We'll
don't
get
know.
into that.
Okay.
So I want to ask you a few caregiving questions first. So was it your mother first, or your father first, or together? What were their ailments, and when, and why did they need care?
Okay, well, like I said earlier, and by the way, Dave, you have this magnetic personality, and he's like this, even off camera, everyone. I feel so relaxed. I'm usually nervous, but I
Well,
don't feel
that's my
nervous
job to make you
because I
feel
have my buddy
relaxed.
Ada here. So
I
nonetheless,
know she was so nervous about coming on. I had to talk her into it. And she says, "No, no, no." And then she says, "I'll pray about it." I said, "Oh, I've got her. She's going to pray about it." But she dragged you into
Ada. Uh-huh.
it.
I think she will because
Yes.
she actually experienced it, so I want to hear it. Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
good, good.
So my mother, she was in her early 70s at the time, and I remember growing up. My mother was 9 years younger than my father, and my
Mm.
dad would always say when I was in my teens, my 20s, 30s, he would always say, right? Mom is gonna live much longer than me. And my dad um, started getting signs of dementia when my mom was in her early 70s. And then after a couple of years, she got her first heart attack.
Oh my.
And
Was she overweight or anything? Was she in a high risk group? It just
well,
happened?
she wasn't really, we didn't have any history whatsoever, but her diet was poor.
Hmm.
Um, because
All
my
that Hawaiian
father,
food, huh?
no, well, my father, right? My father, he had dementia. So basically,
Oh,
having someone in dementia, it's like a big baby. He was
sure.
somewhat competent, but he had accidents. Now that I'm in my 50s, I'm very frank, right? He had accidents and he didn't know he had accidents. He didn't know why he was doing things that were
Yeah.
more like a child. And he was in denial. So because of that, my mother got frustrated, and I think basically her diet declined, and so did her health.
Well, she's a
So
typical
we have
statistic. She's the caregiver who got sicker than her loved one, and in her case, she died. And that is just so, so common. Now, if my book was around when she was a caregiver, she probably could have read about certain things she could do, right? Like put your needs first. What is that, motorcycle?
uh-huh.
Yeah, good
Put your
guess.
needs first. Ask for help. Don't allow guilt to affect your decisions. And there's so many good-meaning people who are out there who have their opinion about this and that, and they're judging us because they don't think we're doing this right or that right, or and putting undeserved guilt on us, and all that stuff will kill you. But wow, that's amazing. So let me ask you, you know what? It's about time for a break. Let's take a break first, and then we will be right back and we'll continue talking. So don't go away. Dave Nassani, the Caregiver's Caregiver, has just released his sixth book entitled It's My Life Too. Reclaim your caregiver sanity by learning when to say yes and when to say no. It was specifically written for caregivers who know they should be putting their needs first, but just don't know how. Dave is the sole caregiver to his wife, Charlene, since 1996. He knows firsthand what caregivers are going through because he is one. And he now speaks all across the country, offering caregivers his incredible caregiver support package. Even the airlines tell us that in the event of an emergency, to put your oxygen mask on first before you help your child with their mask. They know that those who don't heed their advice often black out, thus becoming unable to help either themselves or their child. And caregivers are exactly the same way. It's My Life Too. Reclaim your caregiver sanity by learning when to say yes and when to say no. Will help caregivers who are neglecting their sleep, diet, and social life and learn to put their needs first. Pick up your copy today or buy one for your special caregiver. On sale everywhere and at caregiverscaregiver.com. And we're back with Wendy and Ara. Is she coming back or did she ditch you?
She's coming back. She's getting a glass of water.
Okay, well, that's a good idea. So I want to ask you, how long were you a caregiver for? You said 7 years?
More or less.
More or less. Just a
Reason why
big
I say
blur in the
that.
past, huh?
Well, because my siblings and I, we had shifts, so perhaps maybe a third of that time span I was with my parents while my siblings, we alternated care.
So you were taking care of both of them together?
My mother passed, no, my mother, we took care of both parents in a sense where we had an eye opener when my mother had her first heart attack. The
Mm-hmm.
doctor stated that they both needed 24-hour supervision. And we
Oh,
were shocked. First thing I said was, oh, well, will health insurance pay for that?
silly
And
girl.
that was a rude awakening. They said, no. And I said, oh my goodness. So who's going to pay for this? So that was a rude awakening. But
How many
then
siblings?
I have two siblings and we fought each other all the way to this
Mm.
day. I think I like my siblings, but through God, um, I will eventually love them, but I forgive them, and I
Are
hope
they
they forgive me.
boy or girl? Sisters,
I
brothers?
have one brother and one sister. I'm the youngest. I'm 11 years
Oh,
younger than my brother, 9 years younger than my sister. When we were
Wow.
growing up, here comes Ada. When we were growing up, I thought I was going to be the one that was the carefree one, and basically my siblings would be the one that would care for my parents. But lo
Yeah,
and
they had.
behold, I was the main, um, not caregiver, but I was the one holding.
You were carrying the bag. You were doing everything.
Yeah, I was the leader. I was the director. Something you're never prepared for.
Yeah, it's not on
It
your
makes,
resume.
yeah, it's best to talk about. I mean, it's your book, Dave, but I think best talking to both parents before something like this actually happens. I mean, I think we're the first generation basically where we have to care for people because way back ago we didn't have this experience where our grandparents lived so long because of um, you know
Yeah,
because of the medical technology. So
yeah.
I
That's
tell
why we're
my
seeing so much dementia because people are just living too long. They used to
yes,
call it senility.
humility, yes, and now they have a cure for, right? They're coming up with a cure for dementia.
Well, I hope so.
So
I don't think they're
we'll
there yet.
see.
They just have
So I
pills
hope
that
mhm,
prolongs it.
prolongs it. Yes.
Yeah, but I don't know if I had dementia or Alzheimer's, I'm not sure that I want it prolonged. I would want to end it, because the quality of life is so bad. I mean, my mother wanted to die for 3 years because she just, it's no fun not knowing who you are, not knowing what you're doing,
Mhm.
not knowing, the names of your kids and your grandkids. And now, my mother-in-law has it now. Totally different symptoms. She is in total denial that she has it. She's just fighting
That's what I said. Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with me. I can. She's gone to some doctors and they're very reluctant to diagnose her with dementia because she passes the tests and yet she doesn't know what she did a minute ago. And we put her in the hospital for observation for 4 days one time because she was severely dehydrated, and they got her healthy again. And I said, but what about her mental condition? He says, well, we can't hold someone because of their mental. We can only hold because of their physical. He says there's new laws that were passed in California that give seniors a lot of rights because a lot of children were taking advantage of their seniors and wanting to steal their assets. And as you heard of that famous case, the Menendez brothers, they actually killed their parents because they wanted their house and stuff. And so now the pendulum has swung too far to the other side. Now they're protecting seniors who need protection from themselves because she's still living alone in her own house. And we bring live-in caregivers, but then she fires them because they things she forgets where she puts things and they're stealing, and she calls the police on them. And no caregiver is going to put up with that kind of abuse.
Mhm. But
Mhm.
there
So
are people who abuse the seniors.
Yes.
yes,
They
there
go
are.
both.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it's a minority. It's a very slim number, but we hear about it a lot, so it gets a lot of attention. You know, but unfortunately, that's life. And did you have something that you wanted to add, Ada, as far as um, what do I want to say here? Tell us what you do with your hospice volunteers. What do you see out there with people going through hospice?
A lot of them, they're not prepared. They didn't prepare the parents to be at hospice.
Mm,
Um, and I also have seen pictures. It's like before he got this ill, and this guy, he just looked like lost 80 pounds because he had a tumor. And
wow.
yet, 2 months ago, he was just healthy and vibrant.
It
Uh,
goes that quick, huh? Where you can just
yeah,
lose that much weight in two
there are,
weeks?
there are, there are different cases. And but what I notice out of family, some family are just there, day in and day out, are just there. Um, some family just after, just come for a few weeks and then just slowly not coming. The saddest part is I've seen one resident She had no family, no children. She never been married, and she came from Japan. So she has siblings in Japan, but yet she did not want the sibling to know that she is going.
I can
So a
understand
situation
that.
like that is for me, it's very sad. It's very sad. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But she
Yeah.
gives them inspiration.
But there are
Yeah.
people, the good thing is before they, they know that they're not well, and their hearts are open for the Lord. So that's when I come in
Mm.
for prayer, and that part really
You're
just really blessed me.
you're a breath of life and a light shining on a hill. Can you turn your thing down a little? We're cutting your chin off there. I can't see
Okay.
the bottom. Oh, that's better. Okay.
So sit up straight.
Sit up
Just loud.
straight.
We're a little comfortable, that's why.
Yes.
How's that?
That's
You
good.
want us to lower it? Lower that? Did you take a there?
No, you're good. You're good there.
Okay, you good? Yeah, just sit straight.
Just in case.
Just sit straight.
Yeah, my mother went into hospice, and I used it as an opportunity because she had her living will, her advance directive filled out. For those of you who don't know, that's something where you direct your last days. You direct if and when you want to die. In other words, you can say, "Well, I don't want anything that will keep me alive if I would die naturally." Now, sometimes that means getting the paddles to resuscitate you if your heart stops. Sometimes that means not allowing feeding tubes to go down into your throat so to keep you alive with food and water. Sometimes it means not allowing a breathing ventilator if you can't breathe on your own. And so she checked everything. No, I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want that. And so I told the doctor, I says, okay, she's in here and she was having trouble swallowing, but she has an advance directive and she wants to die. She's ready to die. She knows Jesus, and that would just make her very, very happy. So she does. They wanted to put a feeding tube, and I says, nope, she doesn't want that. And so he was very cooperative. And in 3 days, she passed away, and it was a celebration because she'd been suffering for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I want to go. I don't. It occurred to me a couple of months ago that I'm doing all these things to stay healthy and stay alive and exercise and eat right. And I saw this cartoon about this 100-year-old guy just hunched over. I mean, he looked like hell, and he just was so old and so decrepit. And the doctor says, "Yeah, remember that all that good living and healthy eating that you did that was going to give you 20 extra years of life?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, this is it." you know so the quality of life isn't always going to be great, and so I'm not sure I want to live after 80, 85, because I've seen the burden that we can be to our kids. Nobody wants to be a burden to their children.
Yeah.
And so when I was 49, I bought a uh, what do they call it, long-term care insurance policy. It was cheap at the time, $110 a month for like $4 million cap or something like that.
Wow, you got it way back.
And so maybe it was 400,000. I know it was 4 with a lot of zeros after it. Anyway, it was enough to go in a very, very nice facility, overlooking the ocean if I wanted to, even though I might not know that the ocean was out there. But and it only went up one time in all those years, because I'm 64 now. It went up last year, just 15%. But it's relatively cheap, especially if you buy it, at your age, Wendy, if you don't already have one.
Yeah,
I do.
We have
both
one.
do.
Yeah, we both
Good,
do.
good. And it's affordable?
Yeah, it's pretty, well, it's getting expensive, but it's okay.
Is it in the $100 a month range? 100, 150?
Hundreds, yeah. I think,
Okay.
yeah, I think we pay 6,000
Yeah.
a year.
But like Wendy said, my mother's facility that we put her in, because she qualified for Medicaid and Medicare, and so they had something called the assisted living waiver program, and so they paid the entire bill, and that was like $3,500 a month. They took her Social Security and paid the difference, and so that's the bad part about getting old, is because Nobody wants to be the burden to their kids and to not know who they are and stuff like that. So tell us, Wendy, for the first 7 years or so, I'm assuming that somehow along the way you were showing symptoms of burnout. So what were your symptoms and how long did it take before you realized, help?
Oh, I don't remember that, but I remember I was because I had a young one. I had the night shift. I had the what is it called when you work at night? I had
The
the mid
graveyard.
graveyard shift. I had the graveyard shift because I had a young one. He was in elementary school playing sports. I had the weekend night shift, so I remember somewhat hating my life, thinking, like I said, I wasn't a Christian back when, wondering when is this going to end? I'm exhausted. I couldn't sleep. I was at my dad's house, sleeping on a couch.
Oh,
Um,
for seven
well,
years?
no, not for 7 years. Well, 7 years, the first 2 years, remember about a year and a half, my mother was alive. But
Yeah.
I was, going
So,
in and out of the house. But more or less for 5 years, we were caring for my father who had
wow.
dementia. And so he would always say, "Go home, Wendy, go home," or we would try to take him to adult daycare, and he'd say, "I don't need to go." He would retaliate, not get out of the car. Mind you, he was only 5'4", but he was 150 pounds, and I could not get him out of the car.
Just like a 2-year-old, huh? They resort to that
Yeah, but I
childhood.
carried him like a 2-year-old to the daycare. He refused to go. So it was really frustrating. But
Was your brother big enough where he could carry him out of the car?
my brother and my dad, it was worse when my brother was there because I guess he had no nurturing experience. He had kids. So I remember my brother saying, "You had an accident in your pants, Dad. We have to change your pants." And my dad saying, because I'm Asian, right? And he would say, "I know karate, If you touch me one more time, I'm going to give you a karate chop." So
Did he say that?
my father never lost his sense of humor, even when he was senile or had dementia. That's why I love my dad. I still love him. And I remember all those silly things that he did when he was competent and when he was not. He still not. So that's what I think a caregiver needs to remember is the times when times were good.
It's a
Right?
cruel, cruel disease. When my wife lost her speech, I used to think that was the cruelest disease, to not be able to talk. It's the only thing that separates us from the animals, to express your deepest, innermost feelings. And I put duct tape over my mouth. I was going to do it for 24 hours because I wanted to see what it was like not to be able to speak or communicate. And I couldn't do it. I had to rip the tape off in like 20 minutes. But since my mother became demented, I changed my mind. That is worse, I think, to not know who you are. I mean, at least my wife knows who she is. She can read. Everything coming in is fine. Just everything going out, it gets a little tweaked. She can't remember how to move her lips and her tongue to say the words she wants to say. She knows what she wants to say. It's on the tip of her tongue, but she just can't spit it out. And she knows how to write, but she can't remember how to spell the word that she wants. So it's like you're trapped in a prison. It's really sad. So listen, we're going to take another break. So don't go away, and we will be right back. Anytime we suffer loss, we grieve. And a lot of people don't realize what even the grief process is. But it could be 5 to 7 steps ranging from denial, I don't believe this is happening, anger, oh my gosh, I'm so upset this is happening, to a form of bargaining, how can I get out of this, to depression, which is a very serious thing because that often leads to suicide. And then finally, after you realize you have no more control over your situation and you're totally okay with the new normal that it brings, that wonderful, wonderful place called acceptance.
Being a caregiver takes a special person with passion and compassion. But even you can become a little burned out from time to time. The Caregiver's Caregiver radio show was developed to help you overcome obstacles, adversity, and burnout, as well as just having a place to rest, relax, and recharge your batteries. We've all been there, and you're not alone. Now, you can take the Caregiver's Caregiver with you. Get the top 25 radio shows in convenient form that plugs right into your USB car stereo or computer. Learn the techniques, tips, and encouragement we all need to better handle the day-to-day challenges. For around $1 per show, just $29.77, get the credit card-sized USB card to have with you anytime you need a caregiver's pick-me-up. Just go to DaveTheCaregiversCaregiver.com and order yours today. Go to DaveTheCaregiversCaregiver.com now. Consider it an investment in you, and ultimately, an investment in them.
All right, we're back with Ada Mark and Wendy Oshiro. Yeah, where does Mark come from, that name?
There is a Chinese Mark and there is a Korean Mark.
Really?
English Mark.
Her
My
husband's
husband's from England.
My husband's half Italian. He's from Sicily, or his ancestors are from Sicily.
So he likes pizza.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And you like
spaghetti.
pizza.
Mhm.
Do Hawaiians like pizza? Yes, Hawaiian style, right?
Don't ask me. I don't cook like Ada, so we eat out just as much as she cooks at home.
You have to tell me some restaurants that you recommend that have good food, because we have not been able to find them here. Now, on this, yes, we'll talk. We'll talk later about that. And I'd like to take you out to dinner, actually. So I want to ask you during this last stretch of the show, explain to us, how is it that you became a Christian? What are the events that led up to it, Wendy? Because you said you would do.
We need an hour.
An hour. Well, give us the 15-minute version, and then let's talk about some things that you would have done differently as a Christian if you were a Christian back when you were a caregiver. So you almost lead me to believe that you lost your temper a lot. Maybe you said things you didn't mean to say. I mean, don't beat yourself up, because caregivers do that all the time. And then they ask forgiveness. Everything's fine. And if they're dealing with a dementia patient, don't worry, they never remember what you did anyway.
After a minute. So briefly, my pastor's wife will thank me about, and it was about, I'm not too sure, 5 years ago, I became a Christian where about 7 years ago, let me go back to 7 years ago, my husband was coaching soccer, and on his soccer team, my current pastor and his wife's son was on the team. So I would bump into them occasionally. They lived in East Oahu, like us, and she would invite us to church. And about 2 years ago, she invited us to church. My son was in Europe, and I said, what the heck? I'll go to church, because my husband and I had nothing better to do. I went to church that day for the very first time in my life, besides Easter. When I was little, I got invited to an Easter egg hunt. But I went to church for the very first time. My pastor was on stage. I mean, Greg is how I know him. And I didn't realize that, hey, going to church is not reciting the Bible, not knowing the Bible. It's kind of cool. It's a stress relief. And everything that he says, and he related to the Bible, to me, it was so true. And how your mental state, how you think positive, how you give your trust in Jesus, and how if you change your heart from the inside, it changes you on the outside. And how I became a Christian that day was that day my teenage son came from Europe. He said, I'm not going to school tomorrow. And I said, yes, you are. You have D's and F's. And he started cursing and saying we were the worst parents on earth. He went home. My husband and him had a big argument to a point where I've never seen my son that upset. He was throwing up, he was crying. I've never seen my son cry, and I told myself it was a sign. That's the reason I went to church that day. And I remember that day. That was the day he came back from Europe. That's the day I went to church for the very first time. That's it.
Wow.
The following week, I went to church, and we kept on going. And my son can actually see the difference in mom because I believe in Jesus. It's not.
She's changed.
Yes, I don't look at.
That's the way it's supposed to be. They're supposed to see Jesus in us, and sometimes use words.
Yeah.
He's not a believer yet, but I'm hoping, and
he will be a believer.
And just basically how it changed me, and it's no longer. It was no longer Tyler. That's my son's name. Oops. Now everybody knows who's my son. What my son's name is. It's no longer the grades, but I see the qualities in my son, the way he is, the way Tyler is. And if we can edit his name, that would be great.
Yeah, if you want his name out, we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's
But
awesome.
to this day, and I'm still growing. I still call myself a baby Jesus follower, and Ada's my mentor.
She has a pure heart. Her heart is pure as gold.
I can see that.
No, thanks to Jesus. She helps me. She keeps me in line when I'm upset with the client, I'm upset with another agent. We have to reflect that we're all different, and we have to see the speck in our eyes too. So Ada helps me with that. And Jesus.
You're very fortunate to be working in the same office with her. Constant.
We actually have a Christian group in our office.
Oh.
Starting, I think, almost 20 years ago, starting with 3 or 5 of us. And I've grown to about 20.
And we're not, don't mind you, we're not a Christian office. We have, everyone believes that they have their own mantra, or mantra you would call it. But there's a few of us that are believers.
Yeah, and the principal broker, the boss, is a strong believer. So, and the owner company, East Walk Realty, is a strong Christian. So I think
it's a great environment to be working in. You're very fortunate,
Yeah.
And so so you're basically saying that being a Christian makes you a better caregiver.
Yes, and if I was a Christian when I was going through this, I think I wouldn't have fought with my siblings as much, because it was basically always my point of view. I wanted it my way because I'm right, but I failed to look at what's the speck in my eye, the plank in my eye. Can you say that?
It's okay.
Yeah, it's like you can get more out of someone with honey than with vinegar.
Yes.
So just having the right attitude, the godly attitude can go a long way in human relationships with siblings, and in stressful situations like in a caregiving situation, and even with a demented father who we forget, isn't in his right mind, and he isn't can't be held responsible for what he does, but we still lose our temper. I have a gas station. I've had a station for 37 years, and I'll never forget. There was a time that this person came in to pay for the gas, and their father, elderly father, who obviously had dementia or Alzheimer's or something, followed him in behind him, and he didn't know. And he says, "What are you doing here? I told you to stay in the car." And he was just ragging on him in front of everybody, just being very disrespectful and humiliating him in public. And it's like, that is not necessary. I mean, he's acting like the guy's in his right mind, and you just can't do stuff like that. But when we're a Christian, we're more inclined. Doesn't mean we're going to be perfect all the time, but we're more inclined to remember. So give us some examples of what you would have done differently and how things would have turned out differently in the last 5 minutes that we have.
Oh, me? Okay. Well, the thing is, now
some quick examples.
I don't think my parents was a real problem, in a sense where I thought everyone else was a problem. For example, the doctors, where all they cared about towards the end of my father's life was He needs to go. He needs to go. The quality of life isn't there. The sensitivity was not there. But don't get me wrong. My dad's main physician, he was wonderful. He would never, his Dr. Lee, I think his name, would always look at my dad and speak to him as an individual, not to me, who was the competent one. He always treated my father with respect. I think I look back and I think if I had Jesus on my side, I would have. I think my siblings, I think it's more or less my siblings and I would get along. I always thought that one of my siblings, all they wanted was to make sure that my father's money was not spent, because she wanted one of my siblings is, I thought they wanted his inheritance, which is not true, of course. All I wanted him to do was go to a care home, because I was selfish. I was tired. I was burnt out. I didn't care if he spent all his assets. I didn't care if we had a reverse mortgage on his house. I was done with it. But really, my sister, she wanted to care for him because she didn't want him to go to a facility. So how we look at people's ideas and why they do things, they have their own perspective.
Their motives. Motives are very important. And God knows the motives.
And I would have a better understanding.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I can't believe how fast the hour has just flown by, right? Everyone says, an hour? I got to talk for an hour. I says it goes fast.
I'm still nervous. I feel like we just started.
I know. So we thank you so much for coming on the show. And how can someone, if they have questions, further questions, get a hold of you? Or if they're living here in Hawaii and they want to maybe go to your group or maybe go to your church, tell us, which church you go to.
I can give is it safe to give my number away?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can reach me at 808-542-6262. Okay. Just ask for Ada and I'll do whatever I can. The best thing I can do for you is I pray.
Amen.
And we have a senior group. Go on to our website at eastoahu.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on, what else are we on? Instagram. Yeah. We're on.
All that same name, eastoahu.com?
Yeah. East Oahu. Google East Oahu Real Estate. East Oahu Realty. East Oahu Realty.
No, even eastoahu.com.
Okay.
You can find us. Yeah. Either case.
Really? That's a great domain name. Somebody I would think would want that.
I think it's ours.
That's our
company. It's yours.
Yeah, it's our company.
One day you can sell it for, I don't know how much money. But that's awesome. Thank you guys again for coming and showing up on such short notice. And thank you for the wonderful dinner, Ada. We really, really appreciate it. That was the godly, Jesus said, when you give someone a glass of water in my name, to the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. So thank you.
Amen.
And to everyone else, we will see you next week. And thank you, and God bless you all. And goodbye.
Aloha.
Thank you for joining Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver radio show. Make sure you tune in every Wednesday at noon Pacific time and anytime afterwards on podcast to catch more of Dave and his tips to caregivers on avoiding burnout and surviving the grief process right here on the Worldwide Block Talk Radio Network. Goodbye.